On the 19th of May 2021, at 1200 hours and 33 minutes GMT BST, the questioner became aware of the fact that some form of correspondence had been posted through the letterbox, and they asked the following question. What just came through the door? Who is it from? The number of syllables prevalent within the questioner's speech pattern generated a number sequence of 424. According to KhemAstroMath-Horary philosophy, the number sequence of 424 generates an ascendant that is between 60 degrees to 90 degrees absolute longitude. This translates to the tropical sign of Gemini. This is the chart that was generated as a result. The delineational prediction is as follows. The correspondence that has just arrived through your door has come from and has been sent by and sent from an organization that specializes in generating revenue and profits in relation to contractual arrangements and agreements, in relation to homes, buildings, and or domestic dwellings, and can even be specialists when it comes to mortgages and finance. The correspondence itself contains detailed information regarding your finances in relation to your financial activity, in relation to your independent business activity, in line and or intertwined with your career. The third sector, the third house, the third sector represents any type of correspondence. The third sector or any planets in the third represents any type of correspondence that has been sent through the post or arrives through the post, be it letters or packages or what have you. The moon is in the third. The moon is the lord of the second. Money, finances, revenue, and profits. Yeah, the moon is the lord of the second. And the moon is in the third. The lord of the third is the sun. The sun represents some form of authority. The sun, the form of authority responsible for sending the correspondence, is in the exaltation of the moon, who happens to be the lord of the second, money, revenue, and finances. So the organization responsible for sending the correspondence is interested in generating money and revenue. Yeah? In relation to what? Well, the lord of the second, i.e. the moon, is in the third, and the third happens to be the fourth from the place of the sun. Therefore, the fourth, representing domestic environments and buildings, shows that the organization who's responsible for sending the correspondence is interested in generating revenue finances in relation to domestic dwellings, buildings, and the sun is joined with Uranus. The 12th part of Uranus is in the radical fourth. This is another testimony that shows the fourth representing domestic dwellings, and the sign on the fourth is Virgo. Virgo represents documentation, paperwork, and contracts. So again, this further supports that the organization responsible for sending the correspondence is interested in generating money and revenue in relation to domestic dwellings, and may be specialists when it comes to creating contractual arrangements in relation to mortgages. All right. Now, a further testimony of this is the fact that the 12th part of the lord of the third, i.e. the sun, is in the 11th. And by declination, Mercury, or Decli Mercury for short, is out of bounds in the 11th, joined with the 12th part of the sun. All right. Now, as the 12th part of the lord of the third, i.e. the sun, as well as Decli Mercury, are in the 11th, and Mercury happens to be the lord of the radical fourth, and Decli Mercury being joined with the 12th part of the lord of the third, i.e. the sun, in the 11th. Therefore, the first part of the sun is now in the second from the place of the 12th part of the sun. The second represents money generated in relation to anything. So the second represents money and finances and profits. And as established earlier, the first part of the sun, who's the lord of the third, is in the exaltation of the moon. The moon is the lord of the fourth from the place of the 12th part of the sun. All right, the fourth representing domestic dwellings. Yeah, and the 12th part of the sun therefore makes the first part of the sun be in the second from the place of the 12th part of the sun, and the second is money and profits and revenue, and with the first part of the sun being in exaltation of the lord of the fourth from the place of the 12th part of the sun, shows they want to generate revenue in relation to domestic dwellings and buildings and houses. All right. Now, there's further different geometric approaches that we can show the exact same outcome, but I think you get the picture. Now, the second part of the delineation was as follows. The correspondence that has been sent contains detailed financial information in relation to your independent business activity in relation to your career. Yeah? That was the second part of the delineation for the questioner. How do we know this? We know this because, as established earlier, the moon is in the third and the moon is the lord of the second. Money, finances. And in the second we have Mars. Mars is the lord of the sixth. The sixth represents independent business activity. Yeah, and the lord of the sixth, Mars, is in the exaltation of Jupiter. Jupiter happens to be the lord of the second from the sixth. The second from the sixth. The sixth is the independent business activity, and the second from the sixth represents any money that can be generated in relation to the questioner's independent business activity. And the lord of the second from the sixth, Jupiter, is exalting Mars, as well as being the lord of the 10th. All right, the 10th representing the questioner's job, exalting Mars, and Mars being the lord of the sixth independent business activity. All right. Now, on top of this, a further testimony of this is the fact that Mercury, the lord of the ascendant, therefore representing the person asking the question, is joined to Venus, and the 12th part of Venus is also in the sixth. Now, Venus is in the sixth and therefore represents the person's independent business activity, and the lord of the second from the sixth, Jupiter, is in the exaltation of Venus. So again, the independent business activity of the person asking the question, their activity, what their goal is to exalt Jupiter, who happens to be the lord of the second, from the place of the sixth. So they want to make money and generate revenue in relation to the independent business activity. And this is shown with the lord of the second from the sixth, Jupiter, being the exaltation of Venus, while the 12th part of Venus is in the sixth. All right. A further testimony of this is the fact that the 12th part of the lord of the ascendant, Mercury, is in the 9th, joined with Saturn. And Saturn is the lord of the 8th. 8th represents other people's money and or debt and or trying to generate revenue in relation to putting other people in debt. All right. And Mercury being joined with Saturn, the lord of the 8th, is another testimony that the information that is contained represents detailed information in relation to the finances, because Mercury is joined with the Sun. Sorry, Mercury is joined with Saturn, and Saturn is the lord of the 8th. All right. Now, further, with the 12th part of the lord of the ascendant being joined with Saturn, and the first part of Mercury being joined with Venus, and with Venus exalting Jupiter. Jupiter is in the 10th, which happens to be the second from the place of the 12th part of the lord of the ascendant. The second represents money and finances again, and Mercury is joined with Venus, and the 12th part of Venus is in the sixth. The sixth happens to be the 10th from the place of the 12th part of the lord of the ascendant. Yeah, and the 10th represents your job, your career, what you're actually working for. So therefore, the 12th part of the lord of the ascendant being in the 9th and works for the 10th, where Venus actually is, the 12th part of Venus actually is, and Venus exalts Jupiter, who happens to be in the 10th, which happens to be the second, money and revenue finances, from the place of the 12th part of the lord of the ascendant, and Jupiter also happens to be the lord of the 11th, from the place of the 12th part of the lord of the ascendant. The 11th represents money and finances that can be generated in relation to your job, because the 11th represents and is the second from the 10th, you see. And the 11th from the place of the 12th part of the lord of the ascendant happens also to be the second from the place of the 6th independent business activity. Now, further testimony of this is the fact that the 12th part of Saturn, who happens to be joined with, not really the 12th part of Saturn, by declination, declinational Saturn is also in the 6th, joined with the 12th part of Venus, whose Lord is Mars, who's in the exaltation of Jupiter, who is the Lord of the 2nd from the 6th, while also Jupiter is the Lord of the 11th from the place of the 12th part of the Lord of the Ascendant. All right. Now, I can keep going further with this, with multiple different geometric scenarios. And what I'm illustrating here is the fact that if you have a solid understanding and a solid grasp of the geometry of the oblique circle, you will be able to see multiple derivative houses all at the same time without having to manually count in a linear fashion from one house to the other house in order to work out which house is the derivative of which house. This information is, I haven't seen, written in any astrological texts that have been translated into English from what I have seen. I have learned this from my own field studies and many years of practical experimentation, reading people on the street, as well as working on professional psychic lines and reading people via Horary Astrology without them giving me any information prior to me reading them. They will simply phone up and say to me, for example, my job, my career, my work, can you tell me what's happening? I will ask them to pick 3 numbers, and then I would delineate. And the only thing I would ask them is, after I delineate, I would at various intervals say to them, does that make sense? And they would say yes or no, and you continue. Now, working within and working on a professional psychic line, you very quickly learn what works and what does not work. And if you are reading the person incorrectly, they simply just put the phone down and they hang up. And when they put the phone down, you realize, wow, I was not reading them accurately. And you quickly, due to the way the human mind operates, you quickly learn what techniques work and what techniques do not work. And you start ironing out all of the flaws in your delineational practice. All right. So I developed an understanding of the oblique circle and all of the geometry that is involved. So I could see multiple derivative houses all at the same time superimposed on top of each other, while also incorporating the 12 parts of the planets and superimposing the 12th divisional chart over the 1st divisional chart, and also include the declinational equivalent positions of the planets themselves, and look at all of those 3 charts together. And I also had to develop a way to mentally calculate the 12 parts of the planets themselves and therefore project them onto the 1st divisional chart mentally very quickly. And this is how KhemAstroMath Horary was developed through many years of practical fieldwork and demonstrations. Well, practical fieldwork and experimentation, reading people live on the street and reading on professional psychic lines. This is how this was developed. All right. And that's what I'm demonstrating here. However, if you do not have a solid grasp of the geometry of the oblique circle, you will find these tutorials difficult to follow. But I do teach the details of the geometry of the oblique circle mathematically at the Committee of Ancient Astronomical Mathematics for those who would want to learn. Anyway, the conclusion is as follows. The person asking the question went to their door and they saw that the letter that had been posted through their letterbox was face down on the ground. They picked it up and they opened it, and it proved to be a letter from their bank. And the information within this letter was highly detailed information in relation to their finances and their financial activity in relation to their independent business activity as well as their work. This is the ThaBadbrey Herbalist Asar, ancient astrologer and astronomical mathematician of the Committee of Ancient Astronomical Mathematics, courtesy of ThaBadbrey Herbal.co.uk. Hakamanajum, Dendra.